What's good with you too? From Convict's Perspective, it's your boy Flacco coming live and direct and with a little bit of energy this morning. And like you can tell from the thumbnail, this next video is an interesting topic, man. It's something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about the Border Brothers prison organization. This is a little bit different than what a lot of people in the Bay Area know as the Border Brothers in Oakland. So let me go into a little bit of history behind this prison organization. Okay. The Border Brothers were founded in Tijuana, Mexico back in 1989 by an individual named Sergio Gonzalez Martinez and a few other followers. And their whole purpose was just to have a sub-faction group, little criminal organization. And a lot of it had to do with the county jails and the penal systems out there in Mexico. As people migrated across the border to conduct businesses and conduct illegal activities or to get a righteous job, a lot of them started to move into the United States, Texas, Arizona, California, in different areas. This group started to find its roots around 1993 to 1994 in the California prison system. And see, what the difference is that people don't realize is the Border Brothers established themselves as a protection for their own people. They wanted no alliance with either the North or the South. They had a lot of conflict with a lot of Mara Salvatruchas, a lot of Sureño neighborhoods, and even some Norteños. And their recruiting basis was a little bit different. I'll go into that because I personally knew one. And so this is where I got a lot of my information from doing a lot of networking, a lot of resources, and actually being around these individuals. It's the one prison organization that you don't hear too much about. But the Border Brothers, like I said, their roots started to get established in the penal system around 1993, 1994. They probably had been there a little bit longer, but CDC started taking notice of them around 1993 and 94. And like I said, their recruiting basis was a little bit different. A lot of people have misconceptions that they were just vices from Mexico. They were all, majority would have to have their roots from Mexico, but what it was is the Border Brothers symbolized all the Mexican cities and states that were along the border, like TJ, Juarez, different areas. It had nothing to do with people that were from like Mexico City, Michoacan, Chiapas, all those areas that are more centralized or more down south. They wouldn't be recruited into this organization. The term Border Brother symbolized the Mexican cities along the border. This is where they were from. And they used to use terms like 22, X1, XX, double X11, BB, and the Jaguar god, Ocelote. That used to be a symbol. These are all symbols that they used to have. And I got a lot of information about these guys because at one time when I was in San Quentin back in the mid 90s, I had a cellie. His name was Treinta, and he was from Puente Negro from Jalisco. He had a BB tattooed on him, and he was my cellie in Quentin. And he broke it down. He said that it's a little bit different within their group. Like his BB, he had to earn from putting in work. Like certain tattoos that they symbolized, and the recruitment basis was only for those that were from up north. And what people didn't tend to realize that even within the BISA collective, they used to set trip a little bit too between the North and South. And so the BB prison organization was, its whole focal point was for those Mexicans that were along the border. And they started to network into different types of activities. They started working with different types of cartels, bringing product over the border, and they would establish themselves behind the wall. And he told me personally that they had a neutral stance between the North and the South. It was a conflict that they didn't want to be involved in. And their whole focal point is to protect all other BISAs from any threat of oppression or being abused. And this is where the BB started to transform behind the wall. A lot of people have misconceptions that they're associated with the BBs in Oakland. Now, in a sense, they kind of are. That's how they got migrated up there. A couple individuals from Oakland, people started paroling to the streets or migrating, and a lot of them were BBs from TJ. And that's how they started to have a lot of recruiting base in the 90s in Oakland. What people don't realize is this turned into their own little gang out there in the Oakland streets. And it became their own entity. It was a little bit different. You know what I mean? So the BBs, like I said, in the 90s, they started to be recognized within the CDCR system. And some of their most common enemies, a lot of times, believe it or not, they used to get off a lot with the Africanos. That was one of their main oppositions. And they would try to protect themselves because, like anybody knows, the BISAs in the penal system were not really relevant. As much as the connections they have to Mexico and all that, prison's always been ran by either the North or the South. That's just how it is. And so the BBs, what they did is they gave those paisanos that were from Mexico that aligned with certain beliefs to where that they could have their own little group, their own little functions, their own little politics. Now their political structure was very limited. You know, it was more about uniting their people and protecting their people. And it seems like, you know, if you look at all types of prison gangs and movements, right? Prison organizations, movements, causes, there has to be the threat of oppression. This is what gives uprise. And this is what gives people the incentive to join, the incentive to have a worthy and just cause in their eyes. And whatever that may be, whether it be the Mexican mafia striving for power, or the NF to fight off oppression, and, you know, the North-South trip to do their bidding, and whatever's been calculated as far as in their propaganda to put out there. All these groups, they're built off one thing. Without the threat of oppression, you don't have no reasons for no cause or no movement. And it's the same thing with the BBs. I used to ask them different questions like, you know, what is your goal? What is your agenda? And he used to tell me that their main focus is to be able to have an existence, to be recognized, and to let them know that, like, us Mexicanos, you know, from the border. See, that's the whole focal point. What people, like I said before, people from North and South Mexico, they used to get into it on these main lines, and we're unaware of this because we don't involve ourselves in their politics. And a lot of times we don't realize that they do have some type of political structure. So when in the 90s, the BB started to be not a force to be reckoned with, but they were a group to be acknowledged. And see, a lot of them were being deported at that time. They were getting, after they were done with their sentence, so they started to branch off and get put into different federal facilities. And some of them would recross the border and catch cases in Arizona or Texas. And so the BB's number started to grow. And so no one ever took their existence really serious. Nowadays, you don't really hear about them as much, but they're still prevalent, but they're more, how you say it, less recognized. It's not put out there as much because they're more associated. Whenever there's an issue with the BISAs, this could be BB related. And what people don't realize is, you know, they're not recognized as any of the top four as far as behind the walls. But their recruitment basis, they actually had a few hundred members, believe it or not. And they were able to start conducting different activities and networks and working with different cars. You know what I mean? Like the dude I used to talk to, he used to do a lot of business with North Daniels. He had a lot of respect for North Daniels. In fact, when he was my cellie, I got clearance. We were in Donner section back then. And I got clearance for him to be able, because he was able to be a tier runner. And I was able to get clearance for him to run our wheelers and our kites because he was a strong sympathizer. And see, that's how we used to have to base our relationships with different individuals, is it could be different. You know, some BBs wanted no part of the North Daniels. They were more strong Sureño sympathizers. You know, it's recognized that a lot of them had strong relationships with the 18th Street gang at one time. But a lot of them took a neutral stance, you know. And this is one particular group that you don't hear too much about on the streets or in the prison system because they weren't as flamboyant. A lot of them did a lot of, I would call it farm work for the cartels at one time. A lot of them were the pipelines for a lot of different activities. So it just goes to show that, you know, there's all kinds of different other groups that people have never even heard of, man. And they didn't really have a sophisticated political structure. You know what I mean? Like, I'm unaware of any type of, you know, the NF is really one of the main organizations that has like a chain of command, construction, and some type of hierarchy. You know, as you guys discussed, we discussed the MA yesterday. So the BB really didn't thrive upon that, and it really had its powers laid within whatever individuals were there that were influential. You know what I'm saying? They would have their reps. You know what I'm saying? They would have their association. Just like any other type of group, when you step into something that is new, they adapted with the times and tried to fall and file within any prison institution to where all they wanted was their presence. They were striving for the same things that any other group was, whether it's the Asians or Norteños. Any group that has low in numbers, they're striving for those same incentives. You know what I mean? To be recognized, to have the same equality, to have their showers, to have their TVs. So that's the way that they politically maneuvered. And like I said, they used to have no stance as far as in the North or South. But there was a few that would sympathize more with the Sureños, of course, because of that Mexican culture relationship, you know what I mean? And they identified more with the Sureños than they did with the ones from up north. Then there was those that were BBs that were from up north, like the one that I knew personally. And their relationships with the Norteños was a lot stronger because they had done time. And our whole thing within the what we used to propel within our people and our teachings is to aid all those of Latin descent. So if you were ever given an opportunity in the county jail or in one of our strongholds like Quinn or DVI, we were supposed to take a strong initiative to show paisanos or people from Mexico the same respect and assistance that we could give. You know, things have changed nowadays to where everyone is more focused on their own group. But the BB story is one that's not really put out there as much. You know, I thought about doing a topic this morning. I thought about what I could be doing different. And I remember when I seen Gunnar do his BB spill, a couple people brought up this prison organization. They say, okay, it's a little bit different than Oakland. So the original BBs, before the BBs became in Oakland, was basically started in TJ. And it was a prison organization. It turned into a prison organization. Most prison organizations need their roots to be behind walls where they start. And they're one of the very few groups that actually started out in the streets in a whole town with a whole different reason that migrated into California that became a prison group and organization to be reckoned with. There's been a lot of riots. One of their main oppositions at times, like I said, was the Africanos. And for whatever reason, I knew that there was a lot of issues. I guess there's always been bad relationships between Africanos and Paisanos. And a lot of that is there's always going to be those youngsters who feel like they can, you know, just like the Elote guys, there's always going to be those Africanos that think they can press up on a Paisa because they don't have the backing of the North or the South, which is not true. These Paisas are like, man, they're going to react. They're going to push some type of narrative and they're going to bounce back. And, you know, the one I knew, he was personally a Sav, man. He was telling me stories about how they were getting down. You know what I'm saying? And I got to like the dude a lot, man. He was kind of a J-Cat, man. He was kind of used to crack me up, man. But, you know, I was young in my career and I thought it was interesting, man. BB, he had a BB tattooed on me and he was telling me all this. He even had like 3 dots on him and told me it stood for me, Vida Loca. You know what I'm saying? He said that he'd been questioned by the homeboys before, but he was always open about it. You know what I mean? I'm not no Sureño. You know what I'm saying? He'd say that he had respect for the Norteños, that they've helped him out. You know, that he's been places to where they've assisted each other. And so, you know, that's the one time I could sit there and say that, you know, in some places they probably would have took that, oh, maybe he's an undercover Sureño and tried to take flight on him. But nah, man, he earned his respects there. And through his actions and activities of assisting us, you know, I was able to gain a whole different perspective that carried on to me when I went to different facilities to where I'd have relationships with different paisanos because I seen how it would interact. So when I met people from Juarez, I would talk to them and they would know this individual. When I met some BBs, I would bring up this individual's name. And that was able to open the doors for me to get in certain situations or get the assistance that normally probably would have been closed to a lot of us. Anyways, this is a real quick spill about the BBs, Border Brothers, man. For those that don't know, like I said, they started in TJ, you know what I'm saying, by an individual, Sergio Gonzalez Martinez, and a whole nother group, and they've expounded. And are they relevant today? Not really. Or do they exist today? Yes. And maybe they're a little bit more relevant than that we know, because there's a whole lot of other groups that have spurned up that no one knows about, that are like subsets, that are there for different agendas. and they play a different role and different position behind the walls, man. But the BB is one that story really hasn't been told. It was a prison organization. They did have a recruiting basis, and they did have members, and they had enemies, and they had alliances, and they don't get enough recognition, man. So I know there's a few of you guys that may know, man, about the BBs, and let's realize, like I said, their existence was totally different than the BBs that's in Oakland today. They were something totally different. The BBs in Oakland actually started by those individuals that were part of this group, but they became their own entity out there in the streets. They started having their own monikers and their own colors they started to sport, and it started to change. And I'm not so much going to focus on the BBs from Oakland. As we know, they don't really get along with anybody, the Sureños or the North Daniels. But the original BB existence was a whole total different group, man. And with that, guys, I'm out. This was a short spiel. I was trying to figure out something different, man. This can give you enough information. Maybe you guys can do a little bit of research and pick up where I'm coming from, and you'll see that there was a faction called the BB Prison Organization. With that, it's your boy Flacco. I'm out.